Welcome to Midnight Whispers, the place where shadows stretch longer than the daylight and the quiet of the wild seems alive. Tonight, we're heading to Alaska, a land of endless winter nights, forgotten mining towns, and dark forests where the cold feels like it's watching you. These aren't campfire stories. They're true accounts, local legends, and first-hand encounters gathered from people who swore they'd never speak of them again. As we step into this frozen frontier together, remember, every sound carries farther in the cold, and sometimes, something might be listening back. Before we begin, make sure you've subscribed and tapped the bell. You don't want to miss what lurks in the next whisper. Now, pull your coat tight. The story begins here, where the ice holds secrets older than memory. Story 1. Voices from the Fog. The Coast Guard does not talk about the Kayamaru. If you search the official records, you will find a sanitized incident report about a derelict fishing vessel recovered in the Bering Sea in March of 1989. Equipment failure. Crew abandoned ship. Case closed. But I was on the cutter that found her. And I need someone to know what we really discovered out there in the ice. We picked up the distress beacon on March 14th, about 60 miles north of the Aleutian Islands. No voice transmission, just the automated signal pulsing through the fog. When we reached the coordinates, we found the Kayamaru drifting in a field of pack ice, her engines dead, her deck lights still burning in the gray afternoon. She looked intact, no visible damage, no signs of distress beyond the beacon, just a ghost ship floating silent in the fog. I was part of the boarding team. 5 of us crossed over in the inflatable, secured lines, and climbed onto her deck. The first thing I noticed was the cold. I know that sounds stupid because we were in the Bering Sea in March, but this was different. The temperature on the Kayamaru was at least 10 degrees colder than the surrounding air. Our breath came out in thick clouds. Ice had formed on every metal surface despite the deck lights generating heat. The second thing I noticed was the smell. Seawater and rust and something else. Something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in a freezer. We found the wheelhouse empty. The radio was still on, crackling with static. Coffee cups sat on the console. The liquid inside frozen solid. The ship's log was open on the navigation table. The last entry was dated March 11th, 3 days before we found her. The handwriting started neat and deteriorated into frantic scrawls by the end. I photographed every page before our captain confiscated the log. I still have those photos. I look at them sometimes when I need to remember I am not crazy. The entries described routine fishing operations for the first week. Good catches, clear weather, normal crew morale. Then on March 8th, they encountered fog. Dense fog that came out of nowhere and refused to lift. The captain noted visibility dropping to less than 50 feet. They decided to stay put and wait it out. That night, the voices started. The log described them as distant at first, like someone calling from far away across the ice. The crew thought it was another vessel, maybe a Russian trawler. They tried to respond on the radio but got no answer. The voices continued through the night, always distant, always just barely audible over the wind and the fog. By March 9th, the voices were closer. And they were calling names. Specific names. The names of the crew members. The captain wrote that his navigator, a man named Tanaka, heard his dead father calling to him from the ice. Tanaka wanted to go outside, wanted to find where the voice was coming from. The captain ordered him to stay below deck. March 10th, 3 crew members were missing. They had left during the night watch. The captain found the starboard railgate open. Footprints in the frost led to the edge of the deck and then just stopped. Like the men had walked off the ship and kept going, out onto the ice or into the water. He did not know which. The final entry was barely legible. The captain wrote that he could hear his wife calling to him. She had died 2 years earlier from cancer. But he could hear her voice so clearly, telling him to come outside, telling him she was waiting just beyond the fog, telling him she had something important to show him. He wrote that he knew it was not really her. He knew it was something else using her voice. But he could not stop himself from wanting to go. The entry ended mid-sentence. Just stopped, like he had put down the pen and walked away. We searched the entire ship. All 7 crew members were gone. Their personal belongings were still in their bunks. Food was still in the galley, half-prepared meals left on the counter. The engine room was empty, but the engines were intact. No mechanical failure. Someone had simply turned them off. We found one body. He was in the fish hold, down in the freezing compartment where they stored the catch. One of the deckhands, according to his ID. He was curled in the corner behind a stack of frozen tuna, hidden like he was trying to escape something. His eyes were open. His face was locked in an expression I still see in my nightmares. Not fear exactly, something worse. Like he had seen something that broke his understanding of the world. The strange part was his hands. Both hands were covering his ears, pressed so hard that his fingers had frozen in that position. The medical examiner later said he had ruptured his own eardrums. He had pushed his fingers into his ears with enough force to puncture the drums, probably trying to block out something he could not bear to hear. We towed the Kaiomaru back to Dutch Harbor. The Coast Guard and the Japanese government launched a joint investigation. They interviewed us separately, asked the same questions over and over, compared our stories looking for inconsistencies. They took the log and all our photos and every piece of physical evidence. They brought in psychologists to evaluate our mental states. They wanted to know if we had experienced anything unusual during the recovery. If we had heard anything, seen anything. I told them no, we all did, because we knew how it would sound. We knew they would think we were suffering from some kind of shared psychosis brought on by the stress and the cold and the disturbing scene we had encountered. But the truth is, we did hear something. It started on the trip back. We were towing the Kaiomaru through the fog, making slow progress toward Dutch Harbor. I was on watch around 2 in the morning when I heard my name. Just once, faint, like someone calling from far away. I looked around, but everyone else was below deck or in the wheelhouse. I wrote it off as exhaustion. Then I heard it again. Clearer this time. My full name, not the nickname everyone used. My actual given name that only my family knew. The voice sounded like my brother. My brother who had drowned 15 years earlier when we were kids, fishing off the coast of Oregon. I went to the rail and looked out at the fog. I could see the Kaiomaru behind us, her deck lights glowing in the mist. And I could see shapes moving on her deck. Tall shapes, too tall to be human. They moved wrong, like they were not quite solid, like they were made of the fog itself. One of them turned toward me. I could not see a face, just a vague suggestion of features in the swirling gray. But I felt it looking at me. I felt it seeing me. And then I heard my brother, his voice again, so clear it could have been coming from right next to me, asking me to come closer, asking me to cross back over to the Kaiomaru, telling me he had been waiting so long and there was something he needed to show me. I backed away from the rail. I went inside and did not come back out until dawn. I never mentioned it to anyone. But later, when we were all required to attend the debriefing, I noticed something. Every member of the boarding team looked exhausted, haunted, like none of us had slept. And I knew they had heard the voices too. The official report concluded that the crew of the Kaiomaru had likely experienced mass psychosis brought on by isolation, stress, and possibly contaminated food or water. The one body we recovered showed signs of extreme psychological distress but no evidence of foul play. The other 6 crew members were declared missing at sea, presumed drowned. The ship was sold for scrap, but I started doing research. I needed to know if other ships had experienced something similar. What I found was a pattern going back decades. Every few years, a vessel goes missing or is found abandoned in the northern Bering Sea. Always during the winter months. Always in heavy fog. The crews are never found. When logbooks are recovered, they often mention voices, things calling from the fog, people hearing their names. The local Aleut and Yupik people have stories about something they call the fog walkers. They say the fog in the Bering Sea is not natural. It comes from somewhere else, somewhere cold and empty, and sometimes things come with it, things that remember the names of the dead, things that can speak with the voices of people you have lost. They say the fog walkers call to sailors. They use the voices of dead loved ones to lure people out onto the ice or into the water. The people who follow never come back, but they are not dead. Not exactly. They are somewhere else. Somewhere in the fog, still walking, still looking for the voices that called them. I kept working for the Coast Guard for another 5 years after the Kaiomaru. I transferred to warmer waters as soon as I could. I told myself I was fine, that what I heard on the Kaiomaru was just stress and exhaustion, that the shapes I saw on deck were tricks of the light. But then 2 years ago, I was visiting Seattle. I was walking along the waterfront when I saw him. Tanaka, the navigator from the Kaiomaru, the one who had heard his dead father's voice. I recognized him from the crew photo in the log. He was standing at the edge of a pier, staring out at the water. The fog was rolling in from the sound. I called out to him. He did not respond. I got closer and called his name again. He turned slowly and looked at me. His eyes were raw, empty, like he was looking through me at something far away. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, something cold and distant. He turned back to the water and stepped off the pier. Just walked forward like there was solid ground in front of him. I heard the splash. I ran to the edge, but I could not see anything through the fog. The police searched for his body for 3 days. They never found it. I tracked down the other crew members. or tried to. Of the 7 men who vanished from the Kaiomaru, I found records for 5 of them. 4 had been spotted over the years. Always near water, always in fog. They would appear for a few hours, walking aimlessly, not responding to anyone who tried to help them. Then they would disappear again. One was seen in Anchorage, another in Nome, one in a fishing village in northern Japan, the last one in Petropavlovsk, Russia. The pattern was always the same. They appeared in the fog. They stood near water. They seemed to be listening to something no one else could hear. Then they would walk into the water and vanish. The 5th crew member, the captain, was never seen again after the Kaiomaru was found. But 6 months after the incident, his widow received a letter. It had no return address and no postmark. It was his handwriting. She showed it to the investigators and they determined it was genuine. The letter was short. He wrote that he was sorry for leaving. He wrote that the voices had been right. There was something beyond the fog, something vast and cold and beautiful. He said he understood now. He said they were all together out there in the gray, walking, waiting, and eventually everyone would hear their names called. Eventually everyone would follow the voices into the fog. His widow died 2 years later. Heart attack, according to the death certificate. But I spoke to someone who knew her. They said she had become obsessed with foggy days. She would stand at her window for hours, listening. A few weeks before she died, she told a friend that she could hear her husband calling to her. She said he was close. She said soon she would be able to see him. The night she died, there was heavy fog. A neighbor reported seeing her leave her house around midnight. She was walking toward the waterfront. The neighbor called out, but she did not respond. Just kept walking into the fog. They found her body 3 blocks away, lying in the street. No visible injuries, no explanation for her death. But her hands were covering her ears. And her face had that same expression. The one I saw on the deckhand in the Kaiomaru. His hold. That look of having seen something that shattered reality. I am telling you this because I am hearing the voices now. It started last month. Always in the fog. Always when I am near water. I hear my brother calling my name. I hear my father who died 5 years ago. I hear my grandmother and my childhood dog and people I barely remember. They all sound so real. So close. They tell me to come find them. They tell me they have been waiting. They tell me there is something beyond the fog that I need to see. I know it is not them. I know it is the same thing that took the crew of the Kaiomaru. The same thing that has been calling to sailors in the Bering Sea for decades or longer. But knowing that does not make the voices less convincing. It does not stop me from wanting to follow them. I have started avoiding foggy days. I stay inside. I keep away from water. But the voices are getting louder. I can hear them even when there is no fog. Even when I am miles from any ocean or lake or river. They are always there now, whispering at the edge of my hearing. Calling me, promising me answers. I do not know how much longer I can resist. I do not know if anyone can resist once the voices start. Maybe that is what happened to the crew of the Kaiomaru. Maybe they fought it as long as they could. Maybe they knew it was not real. But eventually the voices became too strong, too clear, too convincing. There is fog in the forecast tonight. Heavy fog rolling in from the Pacific. I can already hear my brother calling. He sounds so close. He says he has been waiting for me. He says it is time to stop running. He says the fog is not something to fear. It is a doorway, and everyone eventually has to walk through. I am leaving this recording because I know what is going to happen. When the fog comes tonight, I am going to hear the voices and I am going to follow them. Not because I want to, but because I will not be able to stop myself. Because whatever is out there in the gray has been calling me since the day we found the Kaiomaru. And now it is finally time to answer. If you are listening to this, if you ever find yourself in heavy fog near water, do not listen for voices. Do not stop to hear if someone is calling your name. Because if you hear it once, you will hear it again. And again. And eventually you will follow it. You will walk into the fog like the crew of the Kaiomaru. Like Tanaka, like the captain, like me. And you will find out what is waiting there in the gray. What has always been waiting. What will always be waiting. Story 2. Crying ice. The glaciers started weeping 3 months before I lost my mind on the Juneau ice field. And by the time I heard them myself, it was already too late to leave. I am a glaciologist. That is important to understand up front. I've spent 15 years studying ice formations across North America, from Greenland to Alaska. I've drilled cores, measured retreat rates, documented calving events. I understand ice the way a mechanic understands engines. It is predictable. It follows rules. Except the Mendenhall and Taku glaciers don't follow rules anymore. And what I heard out there in the isolation of that frozen wasteland wasn't natural. It wasn't The ice shifting or water moving through crevasses or wind howling through valleys. It was weeping, human weeping, and it knew my name. The phenomenon started appearing in reports around April. Hikers camping near the Mendenhall Glacier reported hearing what sounded like crying during the night. Not animal sounds, not wind, but unmistakably human sobbing that seemed to come from inside the ice itself. At first, the Park Service dismissed it as acoustic tricks, sound bouncing off ice walls in weird ways. But then the seismologists got involved. They set up equipment to measure any seismic activity that might explain the sounds. Microquakes, ice settling, meltwater channels, anything that could produce the vibrations needed for what people were hearing. They found nothing. The glaciers were producing sound with no identifiable physical cause. The dream started next. Every single person who camped within a mile of either glacier reported the same nightmare. They dreamed of drowning in freezing water, of being pulled down into darkness while ice formed around them. Some said they felt hands grabbing their ankles, dragging them deeper. Others described seeing faces beneath the ice, mouths open in silent screams. A few people woke up with hypothermia symptoms despite sleeping in quality gear with heaters running. One guy, an experienced mountaineer, was found wandering the trail at 3 a.m. in just his underwear, trying to walk onto the glacier. He said the crying had called to him, that he needed to go to it, to help whoever was trapped inside. The university sent me up in July to investigate. They wanted hard data, scientific explanations, something to calm the growing panic that was hurting tourism. I took the job because I was curious and because I didn't believe in supernatural explanations for natural phenomena. Ice is ice. If it was making sounds, there was a reason. I just had to find it. I assembled a small team, rented equipment, and headed up to the Taku Glacier, which was less accessible than Mendenhall and therefore less contaminated by amateur investigators. We set up base camp about half a mile from the glacier face and began our work. The first 3 days were normal. We drilled ice cores, set up hydrophones to listen for water movement, installed seismometers at various points around the glacier. The data came back clean. No unusual activity, no explanation for the sounds that a dozen different groups had reported. My team started joking that we were chasing an urban legend, that the whole thing was mass hysteria amplified by social media. I wanted to believe them. But on the 4th night, I heard it. I was alone in my tent, reviewing data on my laptop, when the sound started. It began as a low moan, almost subsonic, something I felt in my chest before I actually heard it. Then it rose in pitch and clarity until it was unmistakably the sound of someone crying. Not one voice, but many, overlapping and echoing, coming from the direction of the glacier. I grabbed my recorder and headlamp and went outside. The rest of my team was already standing there, staring toward the ice. Nobody spoke. We just listened. The weeping continued for 20 minutes. It would fade to almost nothing, then surge back louder, like waves. And underneath it, if you listened carefully, there were words. Not English, not any language I recognized, but the rhythm and cadence of speech. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse than the sound. It felt expectant, like the glacier was waiting for us to respond. My team wanted to pack up and leave that night. I convinced them to stay until morning, to get at least one more day of readings. It was the second worst decision of my life. That night, the dreams came. I was underwater, sinking through freezing darkness. I could see light above me, the surface of a lake or ocean, but I couldn't swim toward it. Something was holding my legs, pulling me down. I looked down and saw hands, dozens of them, reaching up from the depths. They were gray and bloated, fingers webbed with ice. They grabbed my ankles, my calves, my thighs, pulling me deeper into water so cold it felt like knives. I tried to scream, but water filled my mouth, my lungs, and then I was drowning. I was drowning and freezing at the same time, and somewhere far above me I could hear crying. I woke up gasping, my sleeping bag soaked with sweat despite the cold. My tent was freezing, much colder than it should have been. Frost had formed on the inside of the fabric, and my breath came out in thick white clouds. I checked my thermometer. It read 18 degrees inside the tent. That was impossible. The heater was still running. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, and that is when I saw them. My team was walking toward the glacier. All 4 of them, moving in single file, still in their sleeping clothes. They were maybe 200 yards away, getting closer to the ice with every step. I shouted at them, but they didn't respond. I ran after them, my boots crunching in the snow, my lungs burning from the cold air. I caught up to the closest one, grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. His eyes were open but unfocused, like he was sleepwalking. I slapped him, shook him, yelled directly in his face. Nothing. He just turned back toward the glacier and kept walking. I managed to tackle 2 of them before they reached the ice, physically drag them back toward camp. The other 2 made it to the glacier face before I could stop them. They pressed their hands against the ice, and I swear to God, the ice opened. Not melted, not cracked. Opened. Like a mouth. It swallowed them in seconds, closing back up seamlessly. I stood there in the snow, holding 2 unconscious team members, staring at the spot where the other 2 had vanished. There was no sign they'd ever been there. The ice was smooth and unbroken. The 2 I saved woke up an hour later with no memory of leaving their tents. They remembered the dream, though. Everyone had the same dream. When I told them what happened to the others, they didn't believe me until we searched the camp and found 2 empty sleeping bags. We called for a rescue helicopter immediately, packed up everything we could carry, and hiked out to a clearing where we could be picked up. I filed reports with the Park Service, the university, and the police. Search and rescue teams scoured the glacier for weeks. They never found any trace of my missing team members. The university declined to send another expedition. They classified the whole thing as an accident, blamed inadequate safety protocols, and quietly shelved all research into the weeping glaciers. The Park Service restricted camping near both Mendenhall and Taku, citing hazardous conditions. The official story was that increased meltwater was creating unstable ice that could collapse without warning. No mention of sounds or dreams or people being absorbed by ice that moved like a living thing. The story died down over the summer, and by fall, it was just another weird Alaska tale that nobody quite believed. But I couldn't let it go. I started researching the history of the glaciers, digging through archives and historical records, looking for any precedent. What I found made everything worse. The indigenous Tlingit people have stories about the Taku Glacier going back centuries. They say it's a place where the dead go, that the ice is a boundary between our world and the next. There are specific legends about a catastrophe, a time when many people died on the ice during a winter ceremony. The stories say their spirits became trapped, frozen into the glacier itself, and that they cry out during certain times of the year when the ice is unstable. I found records from early Russian and American explorers who mentioned hearing strange sounds near the glaciers. In 1887, a prospector named James Whitmore wrote in his journal about camping near the Taku and being kept awake by what he called infernal weeping that came from the ice. He said it drove 3 of his companions mad, that they walked onto the glacier in the middle of the night and were never seen again. Similar accounts appeared every few decades, always describing the same phenomena. Crying from the ice, dreams of drowning, people disappearing. Then I found something that changed everything. A geological survey from 1952 documented unusually high concentrations of preserved organic material in the Taku Glacier. The surveyor noted what appeared to be human remains visible in the ice face, multiple bodies frozen in various positions. He reported it to authorities, but when a team was sent to investigate, they found nothing. The bodies had apparently moved deeper into the glacier, or the ice had shifted to hide them. The surveyor was dismissed as unreliable, possibly suffering from altitude sickness. But I knew he'd been telling the truth. I knew because I'd seen the ice open. I knew because I watched it take my team. And I knew, with growing certainty, that whatever was trapped in those glaciers wasn't just crying. It was hunting. It was luring people close enough to add them to whatever collection of dead it had accumulated over the centuries. The dreams were bait. The weeping was bait. And I led 4 people directly into the trap. I tried to move on. I took a job in Colorado studying snowpack, as far from Alaska as I could get while staying in my field. I stopped reading about the glaciers, stopped following reports of strange sounds or missing hikers. I convinced myself I'd done everything I could, that what happened wasn't my fault. But the dreams never stopped. Every night, I'm back in that freezing water, sinking, feeling those hands pull me down. And every night, I hear the weeping. Only now, I recognize some of the voices. They were my team members, the 2 who were taken. They were calling my name from inside the ice. 3 weeks ago, I received a package at my office. No return address, postmarked from Juneau. Inside was a memory card and a note written in handwriting I recognized. It belonged to one of my missing team members. The note said only, "Come back. We're still here. We're all still here." I plugged the memory card into my computer with shaking hands. It contained a single video file, recorded on a phone camera. The footage was dark and shaky, filmed from inside what looked like a cave. Ice walls surrounded the camera, glowing with a faint blue light. And then the camera panned, and I saw them. Dozens of people, maybe more, frozen into the walls of the cave. Some were recent, still wearing modern clothing. Others were ancient, dressed in furs and traditional Tlingit garments. They were all perfectly preserved, eyes open, mouths stretched in expressions of terror or sadness. The camera moved closer to one of the frozen figures, and I recognized his face. My team member, the one who sent the package. His lips were moving inside the ice, forming words I couldn't hear. The video ended. I watched it 17 more times, looking for any sign it was fake, any indication this was someone's sick idea of a joke. But I knew it wasn't. I knew because I could feel the cold radiating from my computer screen, because I heard weeping in the background of the video, because something deep in my chest recognized the truth. They weren't dead. They were trapped, conscious, frozen inside that glacier for God knows how long, maybe forever, still aware, still suffering. I haven't decided yet if I am going back. Part of me knows I should, that I owe it to them to try to help, to document what is really happening, to warn people away. But another part, the part that still wants to live, knows that going back means joining them. The glacier is patient. It has been collecting people for hundreds of years. It can wait for me. It knows I'll come eventually, drawn by guilt or curiosity or that terrible human need to understand things that should stay unknown. The weeping will call to me, just like it called to everyone else. And when I get close enough, the ice will open its mouth one more time. Sometimes, late at night, I stand at my window and look north. I imagine I can hear it from here, across thousands of miles, the sound of the crying glaciers. I imagine all those voices, all those trapped spirits, weeping together in the darkness beneath the ice. And I wonder how long it takes before you stop feeling the cold, before the suffering becomes normal, before you read just another voice in the chorus of the damned. I wonder if my team members are still themselves, or if the glacier has taken that too, leaving only the crying behind. The ice is melting. Climate change is accelerating the retreat of every glacier on Earth. Eventually, the Taku and Mendenhall will melt completely, releasing whatever they held for centuries. I wonder what will happen then. Will those trapped souls finally be free, or will they just transfer to the water, to the ocean, spreading their infection to a new medium? Will the weeping follow the meltwater downstream, calling to people in Juneau, in the coastal towns, drawing them into the sea the way it once drew them onto the ice? I keep the memory card in my desk drawer. I haven't shown it to anyone. Who would believe me? Who would look at that footage and see anything but elaborate special effects? But I know what I saw. I know what is waiting for me up there in the ice. And I know that sooner or later, probably sooner, I'll book a flight to Juneau. I'll hike back up to the Taku Glacier. I'll stand at the edge and listen to the weeping, and I'll understand finally what it has been saying all along. It has been saying, welcome home. It has been saying, join us. It has been saying you were always meant to be here, frozen with the rest, crying forever in the beautiful, terrible ice. Story 3. Man in my house. There are two of me living in my house right now, and I don't know which one is real anymore. My name is Daniel Whitmore. At least, I think it is. I am 41 years old. I work as a commercial fisherman out of Kodiak, Alaska. And 4 months ago, I came home from a fishing trip to find myself already there. Sitting in my chair, eating dinner with my wife and kids. Living my life. The thing that terrifies me most, ISM, that he exists. It's that nobody else seems to care. Let me start at the beginning. Last June, I signed on for a 3-day halibut run with a crew I worked with for years. Standard job. We left Kodiak Harbor on a Thursday morning, headed out to the fishing grounds about 80 miles south. The weather was good. The catch was decent. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make you think your entire life was about to split in half. We were supposed to come back Saturday evening, but on Friday night, we got word of a storm system moving in faster than predicted. The captain made the call to head back early. We did lose half a day of fishing, but it beat riding out heavy seas with a full hold. Smart decision, the kind that saves lives. We docked in Kodiak around 10 p.m. Friday night. 12 hours early. I remember being happy about it. I surprised Sarah and the kids. Maybe take them out for breakfast Saturday morning. Be the dad who shows up when he is not expected. The kind of small moment that becomes a good memory. I drove home in my truck. Same route I had taken 1,000 times. Up Mill Bay Road, left on Rezanoff, right onto our street. The house was lit up. I could see the flicker of the TV through the living room window. Everything looked normal. Everything looked like home. I used my key, opened the front door, called out that I was back early. And that, when I saw him, sitting in my recliner, wearing my clothes, my old Seahawks sweatshirt with the stain on the sleeve from when Tommy spilled grape juice 2 years ago. My reading glasses perched on his nose, my face looking up at me with an expression of mild surprise. Sarah came out of the kitchen, saw me standing in the doorway, and smiled. She said, "Welcome home, honey. You early," and kissed the man in my chair. Not me, him. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. The man in my chair stood up slowly. He was my height, my build, same scar on his left hand from a fishing hook, same crooked pinky finger from a break that never set right. Same everything. We stared at each other, and I saw in his eyes the same confusion and horror that must have been in mine. Sarah looked between us, then she laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "You guys look so much alike. I should have warned you Danny was bringing his cousin over." Cousin. She thought we were cousins. Tommy and Emma came running in, 8 and 6 years old. My kids, they looked at me, looked at him. Tommy said, "Cool, Dad has a twin." Emma asked if we were going to do magic tricks. The other me, the one in my chair, finally spoke. His voice was my voice. Same slight rasp from years of shouting over engine noise. He said, "Yeah, surprise, my cousin Danny came to visit." Isn't that wild how much we look alike? I opened my mouth to scream, to tell them this was insane, that I was their husband and father, that this man was some kind of imposter or clone or demon. But something stopped me, some instinct, some deep survival sense that told me if I pushed this too hard right now, something terrible would happen. So I played along. I shook his hand, felt my own palm against mine, felt my own grip, the same pressure I use, the same calluses in the same places. And I introduced myself as Cousin Danny. The kids hugged me. Sarah offered me coffee, and the other me watched with eyes that held the same trapped terror I felt. That night, Sarah insisted I stay in the guest room. The other me slept in my bed. With my wife, I lay awake listening to the sounds of my own house, the familiar creaks, the hum of the refrigerator, Sarah's footsteps in the hall. And I wondered if I was losing my mind, if 3 days on the boat had broken something in my brain, if I was hallucinating all of this. But morning came, the other me was still there, making breakfast, my breakfast, scrambled eggs with hot sauce and black coffee, the exact way I make it every Saturday. The kids ate without noticing anything wrong. Sarah kissed him goodbye before heading to her shift at the hospital. And when we were alone, the two of us finally spoke. He asked who I was. I asked him the same question. We both had the same answer. Daniel Whitmore, born March 15th, 1984. Grew up in Seattle. Moved to Kodiak in 2009. Married Sarah Chen in 2012. 2 kids. Commercial fisherman for the last 16 years. Same memories, same life, same everything. I asked him when he got here. He said Thursday morning. He had woken up in bed next to Sarah like always. Gotten up, made coffee, gone to work, come home. Normal day, normal life. But I had been on the boat Thursday. I had been 80 miles offshore pulling halibut. I had video on my phone. Text messages with the crew. Proof that I was where I said I was. He showed me his phone. Different phone. Same number. Text messages with Sarah about what to make for dinner. A photo Emma had sent him of a drawing. Proof that he was where he said he was. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said this happened before. In 1971. He had read about it online years ago. A fisherman named Robert Kincaid came back from a trip to find another version of himself living with his family. The family couldn't tell them apart. Couldn't to choose between them. So they both stayed. And according to the reports, they were both still there. 53 years later, neither one aging, neither one leaving, just existing in the same house, the same life, split in two. I told him that was insane. That it was an urban legend, a story fishermen told to pass time. But he pulled out his laptop and showed me news articles from 1971, follow-up pieces from the 80s and 90s, blurry photos of two identical men standing outside a house on Kodiak Island. And a recent article from 2020, a reporter who tracked them down. Both men still alive, still living together, both claiming to be Robert Kincaid, the family treating them both as if they were the same person. I asked him what we were supposed to do. He said he didn't know, but he wasn't leaving. This was his house, his family, his life. I told him it was my house, my family, my life. They'd been at that same impasse for 4 months. Here is what life looks like now. We both live here. We take turns sleeping in the master bedroom. 1 week him, 1 week me. The other sleeps in the guest room. We both go to work. Same boat, same crew. The captain thinks it is hilarious that I brought my identical twin to work. The crew makes jokes about it. Nobody questions it. We both help with homework. Both go to Emma's soccer games. Both have dinner with Sarah. She treats us exactly the same. Kisses us both. Holds both our hands. Shows both of us the same affection. Like her brain has simply accepted that her husband exists in 2 bodies now and that it's just how things are. The kids call us both Dad. Sometimes they forget which one of us they were just talking to and continue conversations with the other one. We both know all their stories, all their jokes, all their fears and dreams. Because we're the same person, except we're not. Little differences have started to emerge. He prefers tea now. I still drink coffee. He's been having nightmares. I sleep fine. He's growing his beard out. I keep mine trimmed. Small things. But they regrowing. And we just stopped talking. That first week, we tried to figure it out. Tried to find some explanation. Some way to prove which one of us was real and which one was the copy. But there is no way to tell. No test we can run. No memory only one of us has. We re-identical down to our DNA. Down to our thoughts. Down to our souls. So now we just exist, passing each other in the hallway, sitting at opposite ends of the couch, eating meals in silence while Sarah and the kids chatter between us. We make eye contact sometimes, and I see in his eyes the same question that haunts me every moment. Which one of us is the original? And does it even matter anymore? I started researching. Late at night, when it is my turn in the guest room, I dig through everything I can find about Robert Kincaid in the 1971 incident. And I found things that aren't in the official reports. People who lived near the Kincaid house reported strange occurrences. Electronics malfunctioning, compasses spinning, a feeling of wrongness in the air. Like reality had been torn and poorly stitched back together. And there were others, not just Kincaid, reports going back over a century. Fishermen, loggers, hunters, men who worked alone in remote places, coming back to find duplicates of themselves. Sometimes the families could tell them apart. Those situations ended violently. Murder or suicide. One version eliminating the other. But sometimes, like with Kincaid, like with me, the families couldn't tell the difference. And in those cases, both versions stayed, living side by side, until something changed. Because here is what I found that terrifies me. In every documented case where both versions coexisted, one of them eventually disappeared. Not died, disappeared, just stopped existing one day. Usually within a year. The family would wake up and only one would be there. And they would have no memory of there ever being two. Reality healing itself, erasing the duplicate. But which one gets erased? That is what I can figure out. Is it random? Is it the one who tries to leave? Is it the one who accepts the situation? Or is it the one who realizes the truth? Because I am starting to suspect there is a truth. Something we were both missing. Something about why this happens. Last week, I found something in the garage. Hidden behind some old fishing gear. A journal. My handwriting. But I didn't write it. He did. I read it. Every page. And what I found made me understand why we don't talk anymore. It's been having memories that I don't have. Small things at first. Different routes he drove. Different conversations. Different versions of the same days. And the memories are changing. Updating. He remembers our wedding differently now. Different vows. Different weather. Different guests. His reality is shifting, overriding itself, becoming something slightly different. And the worst part is, he is noticing that Sarah is changing too. Her face is subtly different when she looks at him. More familiar, more right, like she is slowly becoming his Sarah instead of our Sarah. He thinks he is winning. That reality is choosing him as the real one. In the duplicate who will disappear. But they've been having the same changes, the same shifting memories, the same feeling that Sarah looks at me with more recognition each day. That the kids respond to me more naturally. That this house is more mine and less his. We're both becoming more real. Both becoming more solid. Both being chosen by reality. Which means we're both wrong about what is happening. I went to the library yesterday. Found records of the original Kincaid incident. Read the full police reports. And buried in the witness statements, I found something the articles never mentioned. A fisherman who lived near Kincaid said he saw both Roberts the night before they stopped talking. They were standing in the backyard at midnight, both of them, staring up at the sky, at something in the sky. And the next morning, there were 3 of them, 3 Robert Kincaids, living in the same house, the family treating all 3 as the same person. Until a week later, there were 4. The multiplication doesn't stop. It accelerates. I hated. It told the other me what I found. I done. I think I can. Because if he knows, if he realizes what is coming, one of us will try to stop it. And I don't. Do you know what happens if we fight? If one of us tries to eliminate the other, maybe that is what triggers it. Maybe the violence is what causes the split to spread. This morning, I woke up and came downstairs. The other me was already at the table, having coffee, but something was different. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw in his eyes that he had figured it out too. Neither of us is the original. We both copies, both duplicates of a Daniel Whitmore who hasn't existed since last Thursday. The real one, the original, is gone. Erased the moment we split. And what is left? 2 imperfect copies of a man who no longer exists. And the process ISN, done. We can both feel it, a pulling sensation. Like reality is trying to split us again. Like we're going to divide into 4, then 8, then 16. An infinite regression of Daniel Whitmores, all living in the same house, all claiming the same life. Until there are so many of us that the family can to ignore it anymore. Until reality can to hold the contradiction. Until something breaks. Sarah came down this morning, kissed me, kissed him, made breakfast for the kids. She still can to tell the difference. Still treats us as one person. But I saw her hesitate, just for a second, when she looked at the table and saw both of us sitting there. A flicker of confusion, of recognition that something is wrong. It is starting. The crack in her perception. The moment when the illusion fails. And when that happens, when she finally sees us as separate people, do you know what comes next? Does she choose? Does she reject both of us? Or does reality choose for her? Does it decide which one of us gets to stay and which one fades into nothing? Tommy came downstairs this morning and called me Dad. Then he looked at the other me and stopped. Really stopped. For the first time in 4 months, I saw confusion in his eyes. Like he was seeing double. Like his brain was trying to reconcile 2 fathers where there should be one. I think we're running out of time. I think the split is reaching its conclusion. One way or another, this ends soon. The other me is writing again. I can hear him in the guest room, updating his journal, recording his version of events. And I am doing the same. Both of us trying to leave a record. Both of us trying to prove we existed. But here is what neither of us has written down yet. The truth we're both avoiding. The thing we both know but one, to acknowledge, we're not the only ones splitting. I saw Sarah in the kitchen yesterday, pouring coffee. And for just a moment, I saw 2 of her, one slightly behind the other. Same motion, same person, but doubled. And last night, I heard Emma talking to herself in her room. Except it wasn't to herself. It was to another Emma. I heard 2 voices, same voice, having a conversation. The split ISN, to just us. It is spreading to everyone in the house, to everyone we touch. We're not duplicates. We're a contagion, a terror in reality that is expanding, taking everything with it. By the time you hear this, you know how many of me will be left? How many of us will be sitting in this house, living this fractured life? But I know this. It started with a fisherman in 1971, and it has never stopped. There are houses all over Kodiak where this is happening. Families that have split, multiplied, become something other than human. And nobody notices, nobody questions, because the moment you split, the moment you become 2, your family splits with you. And their families, and their friends, an infinite branching of duplicated lives. We're all living in a Kodiak that has been photocopying itself for 50 years. Layer upon layer of imperfect copies. And none of us can tell which layer is real. If you, re-listening to this, check your house tonight. Really look at your family. Count them. Make sure there's only one of each person. Because if you find 2, it's already too late. They've been part of the split for longer than you remember. And soon, will split too. And I'll spend the rest of your existence wondering which version of you is real. Which version gets to keep living? And which version is just an echo? A ghost. A copy of someone who died the moment you looked away. I can see him right now. The other me, standing in the doorway. And behind him, I can see another. And another, fading back into infinity. All of us staring at each other. All of us asking the same question. Which one am I? Story 4. Breathing fog. I need to tell you about the fog on Adak Island before someone else disappears into it. Before someone else makes the same mistake I almost made. The Coast Guard calls it a weather phenomenon. The locals call it the hungry fog. I call it the thing that took my partner and tried to take me. I was stationed at the old Naval Air Facility on Adak in October of last year. Security contractor work. The base officially closed in 1997, but the government still maintains a skeleton crew to monitor equipment and keep vandals out of the abandoned buildings. It was supposed to be easy money. 6-month rotation, decent pay, nothing to do but walk the perimeter and file reports. They did not tell me about the fog. My partner was a guy named Ron Peterson, 52 years old, former Marine, 20 years of security work under his belt. He knew the Aleutians. He had been stationed on Adak back in the 80s when it was still an active base. When I arrived and they paired us together, his first words to me were a warning. He said to never go outside when the fog came. He said to seal my quarters tight and wait it out. He said the fog on Adak was different from normal fog, and I would understand what he meant when I saw it. I thought he was messing with the new guy. Hazing. The kind of ghost stories old-timers tell to spook rookies. I laughed it off. He did not laugh back. He just looked at me with this tired, serious expression and said he was not joking. He said people had gone missing in that fog. He said their voices could still be heard sometimes, calling from inside it, begging for help that never came. The fog arrived on my third night. I was doing a perimeter check around Building 6, one of the old barracks, when I noticed the air changing. The temperature dropped fast. The wind died completely. And then I saw it rolling in from the Bering Sea. Thick, dense, gray-white, moving faster than any fog I had ever seen. It poured over the hills and between the buildings like water, like it had weight and purpose. I radioed Ron. He told me to get inside immediately, to seal the doors and windows, to not open them for any reason until the fog cleared. The urgency in his voice made my skin crawl. I ran back to the main security office, a small concrete building near the old control tower. Ron was already there, stuffing towels under the door gaps and taping plastic sheeting over the window vents. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was keeping it out. I asked what he meant by it. He did not answer, just kept working, sealing every gap, every crack, every possible entry point. When he finished, he sat down and stared at the door like he expected something to try to break through. The fog reached our building about 10 minutes later. I could see it through the windows, pressing against the glass. It was not moving like normal fog. It was not drifting or swirling. It was pushing, testing, looking for a way inside. I could see shapes in it. Dark forms that almost looked human but were not quite right. Too tall, too thin, moving in ways that did not match any living thing I knew. Then I heard the voices. Faint at first, distant, like people calling from far away. I could not make out words. Just sounds. Crying, pleading, screaming. All of it muffled and distorted like it was coming from underwater. Ron heard it too. I could see him tense up, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The voices got louder, closer. They were right outside the door now. I could hear them clearly. They were calling names. My name, Ron, his name, other names I did not recognize. They sounded desperate, afraid. They begged us to open the door. They said they were lost. They said they needed help. They said they were cold and could not find their way back. Ron grabbed my arm when I stood up. He pulled me back down and shook his head. He told me not to listen. He said it was not real. He said the fog takes people and uses their voices. He said if we opened that door, we would never close it again. We sat there for 6 hours while the voices called to us, while the fog pressed against the windows and seeped through cracks we had missed. I could smell it, damp and cold and wrong, like seawater mixed with something rotten, something dead. The temperature inside the building dropped 20 degrees even with the heater running full blast. Our breath came out in clouds. Ice formed on the interior walls. Then I heard my mother's voice, clear as day. She was calling my name from outside, telling me she was lost, telling me she needed my help, telling me to please open the door because she was so cold and so scared and she could not find her way home. My mother died 3 years ago from lung cancer. But I could hear her voice so perfectly that for a moment I forgot she was gone. For a moment I believed she was really out there, trapped in the fog, waiting for me. I stood up. Ron tackled me. We hit the floor hard and he pinned me there, his hand over my mouth to keep me from calling out. He held me until the urge passed, until my mother's voice faded back into the general chorus of pleading and crying. He told me that was how it worked. The fog learned your memories. It found the voices that would hurt the most, the voices you could not ignore. The fog finally lifted around dawn. It retreated back toward the sea, moving with that same unnatural speed and purpose. When it was gone, Ron and I went outside to check the perimeter. We found handprints on the windows, dozens of them, small and large, all pressed against the glass from the outside. But the prints were not made of moisture or dirt. They were made of frost, frozen into the glass, and they were on the inside too, like something had been pressing from both sides at once. We found other things, patches of ground where the vegetation had died overnight, turned black and brittle like it had been burned by extreme cold. We found one of the motion sensors torn from its mounting and crushed. The metal was twisted and warped. Ron said it looked like something had grabbed it and squeezed until it broke. I asked him how long the fog had been doing this. He said as long as anyone could remember. He said the Aleut people who used to live on Adak had stories about it going back centuries. They called it the breath of the drowned. They said it was made of the souls of people who died at sea. People who were so desperate to get back to land that they became something else. Something hungry and cold that could only exist in the space between water and air. He said 11 people had gone missing on Adak since the base closed. All of them during the fog. None of them were ever found. Their bodies never washed up. Their equipment was never recovered. They just vanished. But their voices were heard later, calling from inside the fog. Always begging for help. Always trying to lure others outside. I started doing my own research. I talked to the few remaining civilians on the island. I read incident reports from the Coast Guard. I found records of disappearances going back to World War II when Adak was first occupied. The pattern was always the same. Dense fog, voices, people going outside to investigate or to help someone they thought was in distress. Then nothing, just empty buildings and abandoned posts. One report stuck with me. A maintenance worker in 1983 had radioed for help during a fog event. He said something was trying to get into his workshop. He said he could hear scratching at the door and voices calling his name. He said the fog was seeping under the door and filling the room. The last thing he transmitted was that he could see faces in the fog. Dozens of them, all looking at him, all reaching for him. The recording cut off mid-scream. They found his workshop sealed tight from the inside. No sign of forced entry. No sign of struggle. Just an empty room and a radio still keyed to transmit. Ron and I developed a routine. When the fog warning came, and it always came, we sealed ourselves in and waited. We learned to ignore the voices no matter whose they claimed to be. We learned to recognize the smell that preceded it. We learned which buildings were safer than others. The concrete structures with few windows. The ones that had been built to withstand Aleutian storms. But Ron was getting worn down. I could see it. Every fog event took something from him. He stopped sleeping well. He started drinking more. He would stare out at the sea for hours, watching for the first signs of that gray-white wall rolling in. He told me once that he had heard his daughter in the fog. She was alive and well in Portland. But hearing her voice out there, scared and calling for him, it broke something inside him. The fog came more frequently as winter approached. Every few days, sometimes every day. Each time it lasted longer. Each time the voices were clearer, more convincing, more desperate. I started hearing people I had not thought about in years. Friends from high school, my first girlfriend, my grandfather, all of them lost in the fog. All of them begging me to help them find their way out. Then came December 15th. The fog rolled in around midnight. Ron and I were in the security office. We sealed up like always, but this time was different. This time the fog did not just press against the building. It found a way in. We had missed a ventilation shaft. Old ductwork that we thought was sealed but was not. The fog poured through it like smoke, like it was being pumped in under pressure. Ron tried to seal the vent, but it was too late. The fog filled the room in seconds. Thick, so thick I could not see my hand in front of my face. I could not see Ron even though he was right next to me. The temperature plummeted. I could feel ice forming on my skin, on my eyelashes, inside my lungs. And then I heard them all at once. Every voice the fog had collected. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe. All crying out, all begging, all trying to pull me into whatever place they existed. I felt hands on me, cold hands, dozens of them, grabbing my arms, my legs, my face, trying to drag me down into the fog, into the gray, into the cold. I heard Ron scream, just once, then silence. I called his name but got no answer. I stumbled through the fog, trying to find the door, trying to find a way out. My fingers touched something in the darkness, something cold and wet and wrong. It felt like skin, but it was not skin. It was too soft, too pliable, like it was dissolving under my touch. I do not know how I found the door. Pure luck maybe, or maybe the fog let me find it. Maybe it was not done with me yet. I burst outside and ran. The fog followed me. It chased me across the compound. I could feel it on my back, could feel it trying to wrap around me and pull me in. I made it to one of the old aircraft hangars and sealed myself inside. I huddled in the darkness for 8 hours until the fog retreated. When I came out, Ron was gone. His truck was still parked outside the security office. His coat was still hanging on his chair. His coffee was still sitting on his desk, frozen solid. But Ron was not there. I searched the entire compound. I called his name until my voice gave out. Nothing. He had vanished into the fog just like the others. The Coast Guard sent a team to investigate. They found no evidence of foul play. No signs of struggle. No body. They concluded Ron had left the building during the fog event for unknown reasons and succumbed to exposure. They asked me if he had seemed suicidal, if he had been acting strangely. I told them no. I told them the truth about what happened. They listened politely and then filed a report suggesting I was experiencing psychological distress from isolation and needed to be rotated off the island. I was evacuated 3 days later. They sent a replacement team, 2 guys from Anchorage who had no idea what they were walking into. I tried to warn them. I gave them the same warning Ron gave me. Seal your quarters when the fog comes. Do not listen to the voices. Do not go outside no matter what you hear. They nodded and thanked me, and I could see they thought I was crazy. One of them lasted 2 weeks. He disappeared during a fog event in January. The other one made it a month before requesting emergency evacuation. He would not say what happened. He would not talk about what he saw. He just kept repeating that the fog was not natural and something needed to be done about ADAC. But nothing will be done. Because officially, there is nothing wrong with ADAC. Just a weather phenomenon. Just some unfortunate accidents. Just a few people who made bad decisions during dangerous conditions. The government will keep sending contractors. The contractors will keep disappearing. And the fog will keep coming. Keep calling. Keep taking. I still hear the voices sometimes. Even here in Seattle. Even 1,000 miles from that island. On foggy nights I hear them calling my name. Ron, whose voice is among them now. He sounds distant, muffled, like he is underwater. He tells me he's lost. He tells me he's cold. He tells me to come back to ADAC so he can find me. So we can be lost together. I know it is not really Ron. Ron is gone. Whatever is left of him exists somewhere in that fog. Somewhere in the gray space between the living and the dead. But knowing that does not make his voice less convincing. Does not make me want any less to go back and try to find him. I am telling you this because the fog is spreading. Coast Guard reports show similar events occurring on other Aleutian islands. Attu, Kiska, Unalaska. Each one has had unexplained disappearances during dense fog. Each one has reports of voices calling from within the mist. It is moving east, slowly, but steadily, following the chain of islands toward the mainland. If you live near the coast, if you live anywhere that gets heavy fog, pay attention. Learn to recognize when the fog is moving wrong. When it is too thick or too fast or too purposeful. Learn to recognize the smell. That mix of seawater and rot and cold. And if you ever hear voices calling from the fog, voices of people you know or people you have lost, do not listen. Do not go outside. Seal yourself in and wait. Because the fog is hungry. It has always been hungry. And it will take anyone who listens too long to the voices of the drowned. Story 5. Partner, I found the body 3 weeks ago in a forgotten mining cabin outside Chicken, Alaska. And the thing it was trying to keep out is still looking for a new host. That is not metaphor. That is not trauma or isolation talking. I am a rational man. I am a field archaeologist with the Bureau of Land Management. And they spent 12 years documenting historical sites across Alaska without ever believing in anything I couldn't measure or catalog. But what I found in that cabin, what I read in that journal, what followed me back down the mountain, it doesn't care about my skepticism. It just wants what it's always wanted. A body, flesh and bone and blood that can feel warmth again after more than a century of cold stone and brittle calcium. The cabin was marked on a survey map from 1904 as belonging to a prospector named Samuel Hutchins. Most of these old claims have been picked clean by salvagers or reclaimed by the wilderness. But this one sat in a valley so remote that even modern gold hunters avoided it. The terrain was brutal, steep ravines, loose scree, and forests so thick you couldn't see 10 feet in any direction. I hiked in alone because my usual partner was recovering from a broken ankle, and I figured it would be a quick job. Document the structure, photograph any artifacts, file the report. 2 days maximum. I brought enough supplies for 4, just to be safe. I should have brought enough for 40. The cabin was smaller than I expected, maybe 12 by 12 feet, built from rough-hewn logs that had somehow survived 120 years of weather. The door was barred from the inside, which was unusual. Most prospectors secured their cabins from the outside when they left to keep animals out. I had to pry the door open with a crowbar, and the wood was so warped and swollen that it took 20 minutes of work before it finally gave way. The smell hit me first. Not decay, which would have been normal for a building this old. This was different. Mineral, dusty, like the inside of a cave that had been sealed for centuries. Samuel Hutchins was sitting in a chair in the corner, still wearing his winter coat and boots. Mummification isn't uncommon in the dry cold of interior Alaska. Bodies can last decades if the conditions are right, but Hutchins looked like he died yesterday. His skin was leathery and drawn tight over his skull. His eye sockets were hollow and dark, but his hands were still gripping something. A journal, brown leather, water-stained, tied shut with a strip of rawhide. His fingers had frozen around it in a death grip so strong I had to break 2 of them to pry it loose. I should have left it there. I should have photographed everything, marked the location for a proper excavation team, and hiked back down. But I opened the journal right there in the cabin, sitting on the floor next to a dead man, and I started reading. The entries began in September of 1903. Hutchins wrote about staking his claim, about the isolation, about the brutal work of breaking rock and sifting gravel in sub-freezing temperatures. Normal prospector stuff. But in November, the tone changed. He wrote about finding something in one of his test holes. Not gold, something else. He described it as a shape in the gravel, a pattern of stones and old bones that seemed almost deliberate, almost arranged. He disturbed it with his pick, scattered it, and thought nothing of it until that night. The thing came to his cabin after dark. Hutchins heard it moving outside, a sound like rocks sliding against each other, like gravel being poured from a bucket. He looked out the window and saw it standing at the tree line. He couldn't describe it clearly, kept crossing out words and rewriting them. The best he could manage was that it looked like a man, if a man were made of river stones and animal bones held together by something he couldn't see. It stood there watching the cabin until dawn, then fell apart into a pile of debris when the sun rose. The next night it came closer, and the night after that, closer still. By the end of November, it was scratching at the door, trying to get inside. Hutchins barred the windows and reinforced the door, but the thing was patient. It would spend hours circling the cabin, pressing against the walls, testing for weaknesses. And then it started talking. Not with a voice, Hutchins wrote, but directly into his head. It told him things about the mountain, about gold, about a vein so rich it would make him the wealthiest man in Alaska. All he had to do was follow it, let it show him where to dig. Hutchins was smart enough to be suspicious. He asked what it wanted in return. The thing told him the truth. It had been something once, something alive, but it had died in the cold a very long time ago. It had forgotten how to be human. It existed as pattern and intention, arranging whatever materials it could find into something resembling a body. But it couldn't feel, couldn't taste or touch or sense warmth. It wanted to remember those things. It needed a living body to inhabit, to wear like clothing, so it could experience sensation again. It promised to leave after a day, after one single day of feeling the sun on skin, of tasting food, of being warm. One day, and Hutchins would have more gold than he could carry. He refused, but the thing was persuasive. It showed him where to dig, guiding him telepathically to spots where gold was concentrated. Every day Hutchins would work the claim the thing pointed him toward, and every day he defined color. Small amounts at first, then larger nuggets, then actual veins visible in the rock face. By January, he accumulated nearly 30 pounds of raw gold. More than enough to leave, to go south and live comfortably for the rest of his life. But he couldn't leave. Every time he packed to go, the thing would show him something better, something bigger. Just one more dig, just one more day. The journal entries became more erratic in February. Hutchins wrote about dreams where he was the thing, where he existed as consciousness without form, watching the world through gaps in piles of stone. He wrote about waking up outside the cabin with no memory of leaving, standing in the snow in his nightclothes while the thing stood beside him, its stone body clicking and shifting in the wind. He wrote about feeling it in his mind, pressing against his thoughts, looking for a way inside. He started sleeping with his boots and coat on, the cabin door barred, his rifle across his lap. The final entries were terrifying. Hutchins wrote that he understood now what the thing really was. Not a spirit, not a ghost. It was older than that. It was something that had learned to exist as pure pattern, as information encoded in the arrangement of matter. It didn't need a brain or nerves or organs. It just needed things to arrange, and it could arrange them into the shape of life. It had been doing this for centuries, maybe longer, building temporary bodies from whatever it found, wearing them like puppets, then falling apart when the materials degraded. It had probably been human once, had probably died of exposure or starvation in these mountains, and in those final moments of hypothermia and oxygen deprivation, something in its consciousness had broken free of its biology. It had learned to persist, and it was so lonely. The last entry, dated March 8, 1904, was written in shaking handwriting. Hutchins knew he was dying. He barricaded himself in the cabin, but he'd run out of food and water days before. He was too weak to break through his own fortifications. The thing was outside, patient as always, waiting. It whispered to him constantly now, promised him everything. Rescue, warmth, life. All he had to do was open the door and let it in. Just for a moment, just long enough to put it on like a coat. It would save him, carry him down the mountain in his own body, and then leave. He didn't believe it. He knew if he let it in, he'd never get it out. So he wrote his final words. It wants a body to feel the sun again. I will not give it mine. I finished reading as the sun was setting. I'd been in the cabin for 3 hours, completely absorbed in Hutchins' account. The light coming through the dirty windows was turning orange and red, long shadows stretching across the floor. I should have left immediately. I should have run down that mountain while I still had daylight. But I was too fascinated. I started photographing the cabin interior, documenting Hutchins' remains, collecting samples. Scientific curiosity overriding survival instinct. The mistake of an educated man who thinks knowledge matters more than fear. I heard the sound just after dark. Stones sliding, gravel pouring. It came from outside the cabin, from multiple directions at once. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it through the window, and I saw it. The thing, Hutchins' partner. It was bigger than I imagined. Nearly 7 feet tall, made from river stones and what looked like caribou bones, arranged into a grotesque approximation of a human skeleton. It had no face, just a smooth dome of fitted rocks where a head should be. But I could feel it looking at me. I could feel its attention like pressure behind my eyes. It pressed against the wall, and I heard wood creak. The cabin was old. The logs were half rotted. If it wanted inside, it would get inside. I grabbed my rifle and backed toward the door, and that is when I heard the voice. Not out loud, inside my head, clear as a memory, speaking in a tone that was eager and desperate and utterly inhuman. It told me it had been waiting so long, that Hutchins had refused it, had died rather than share, but I seemed smarter. I seemed like someone who understood. It showed me images, gold everywhere in these mountains, deposits that would make me rich beyond measure. All I had to do was let it feel warmth one more time. One day, one single day of being human again, and I could have everything. I ran. I grabbed my pack and tore open the barricaded door and sprinted into the darkness without thinking about the terrain or the drop-offs or the fact that I was running blind through a forest at night. I heard it following, that terrible sound of rocks grinding together, moving faster than something made of stone should be able to move. I fell twice, cutting my hands on sharp rocks, but I didn't stop. I ran for 2 hours before I lost the sound, before I couldn't to hear it anymore over my own gasping breath and pounding heart. I made it back to my truck the next morning, dehydrated and hypothermic and bleeding from a dozen cuts. I drove straight to Fairbanks and filed my report, told them about the cabin and the body and the gold. I didn't mention the thing, didn't mention the journal entries about something made of stones that could think and hunt and bargain. They have pulled me from field work permanently, set me for psychiatric evaluation. So I lied. I said Hutchins died of exposure and left a valuable historical record. I said the site should be preserved. I said nothing about what was still up there, waiting. But it followed me down. I know this sounds insane. I know you, rethinking isolation got to me, that I read a dead man, his paranoid ramblings, and let them infect my thoughts. But 3 nights ago I heard it outside my apartment in Fairbanks. That sound, stones sliding, and when I looked out my window, I saw a shape standing under the streetlight. Taller than a man, made of gravel and bones. It fell apart when a car drove past, collapsed into rubble, but I saw it start to rebuild itself in the shadows after the car was gone. It's adapting. That is what Hutchins didn't. Do you understand? The thing I sent, confined to the mountain. It can follow. It can travel. It just needs materials to build bodies from. And cities are full of materials. Concrete and rebar and the bones of roadkill and garbage. It can make itself from anything now. And it is so much smarter than Hutchins gave it credit for. It has learned patience over the decades. It knows it doesn't have to force its way inside. It just has to wait until I'm tired enough, scared enough, desperate enough to make a deal. Last night it was standing in my bedroom when I woke up. I saw it in the darkness, a man-shaped pile of gravel and wire and small bones, standing perfectly still at the foot of my bed. It didn't move, didn't attack, just stood there while that voice whispered in my head. So reasonable, so understanding. It told me it knew I was afraid. It told me one day wouldn't hurt, that I could go back to my life after, that I'd be rich and famous for the gold I defined. It told me it just wanted to feel the sun one more time. Just once, after more than a century of cold and dark and stone. Was that really so much to ask? I turned on the light and it fell apart, collapsed into a pile of debris on my floor. But when I tried to clean it up, to bag it and throw it away, I found I couldn't. My hands wouldn't work right. I stood there for 20 minutes, frozen, staring at the pile, and I realized what was happening. It was already inside, not completely, not controlling me yet, but probing, testing, learning the architecture of my thoughts, mapping the pathways that would need to take full possession. I am writing this as a warning. If you, rereading this, if you, rehearing this, stay away from the old mining camps in interior Alaska. Stay away from the cabin outside Chicken, from Samuel Hutchins' claim, from anywhere remote enough that something could wait for over 100 years without being disturbed. And if you hear stones moving at night, if you see shapes made of gravel and bones, if you hear a voice offering you riches in exchange for just one day, one single day of sharing your body, don't to listen, don't to negotiate, don't to try to understand it, just run and don't to stop running, because once it chooses you, once it decides you, you're the one, it will follow you forever. I can feel it now, pressing against the inside of my skull, patient and cold and impossibly old. It's showing me the gold again, great veins of it running through the mountains like arteries. It's showing me the sun rising over the Aleutian Islands, the sensation of warmth on skin, the taste of food, the feeling of being human. It's showing me everything I could have if I just let go, if I just step aside for one day and let it wear me like a coat. And God help me, I'm starting to think about saying yes. Story 6. Demon in the copper mine. The preacher never finished his exorcism. That is what you need to understand before I tell you what I found in the Kennecott mines. Before I explain why I will never set foot in Alaska again. The ritual failed 70 years ago, and whatever he was trying to banish is still down there, still fighting him, still winning. I went to Kennecott in September as a historical researcher. The old copper mining town sits in the Wrangell Mountains, abandoned since 1938, preserved by the cold and dry air like a snapshot of early industrial America. My job was simple: document the remaining structures, photograph the equipment, record any historical artifacts before the Park Service began major restoration work. It was supposed to take 3 weeks. I lasted 4 days. The town was eerily intact, red buildings perched on the mountainside. The massive mill complex rising 14 stories against gray cliffs. Wooden walkways connecting structures across steep terrain. Everything silent except for the wind and the occasional crack of shifting metal. I had the place entirely to myself. The Park Service ranger who dropped me off would not return for a week. He gave me a satellite phone, wished me luck, and left quickly. too quickly, like he was relieved to be leaving. I spent the first day photographing the main buildings. The second day I explored the concentration mill where they had processed the ore. The equipment was still there. Enormous machines frozen in rust. Conveyor belts that had not moved in decades. On the third day, I decided to enter the mine itself. The Bonanza mine entrance was a horizontal tunnel cut into the mountain about half a mile from the town. The opening was sealed with a modern gate, but I had keys from the Park Service. The air that came out when I opened it was cold and stale and wrong. It smelled like copper and stone and something else. Something organic that had been sealed in darkness for too long. I had a helmet with a mounted light, a backup flashlight, and a detailed map of the safe passages. The main tunnel ran straight for about 200 feet before branching into the network of extraction chambers where miners had followed veins of copper ore into the mountain. I was only supposed to document the first 100 feet. Stay in the stable sections. Do not venture deep. But that is when I heard the voice. It came from somewhere ahead in the darkness. A man's voice. Urgent, desperate, speaking words I could not quite make out but recognized as prayer. The cadence was unmistakable, rhythmic, pleading, like someone begging for divine intervention. It echoed off the tunnel walls, making it impossible to determine the exact source. My first thought was that another researcher or explorer had entered the mine. My second thought was wondering how they got past the locked gate. I called out, asked if anyone was there. The praying stopped immediately. Silence filled the tunnel. Then it started again, louder, more frantic, coming from deeper in the mine. I should have left. Every instinct told me to turn around and walk back to daylight. But curiosity overrode caution. I convinced myself someone needed help. I moved forward into the main tunnel, following the voice. The prayer got louder as I descended. I could make out words now. Latin phrases mixed with English. References to demons and unclean spirits. Commands to depart in the name of God. It was an exorcism prayer. Old Catholic rite. The kind of thing I had only heard in movies. And it was coming from multiple directions at once. I stopped walking, aimed my light down different side passages. The voice was in front of me and behind me and to both sides. Not echoing, actually coming from different locations simultaneously. 4 or 5 versions of the same voice, speaking the same words, slightly out of sync like a round or a cannon. It created this disorienting effect where the prayer seemed to fill the entire tunnel system. Then I heard the other sound, a low growling that was not quite animal and not quite human. It moved between the praying voices, circling them, responding to them. Every time the preacher commanded the demon to leave, the growling got louder, angrier, and the prayers became more desperate. I backed toward the entrance. My light swept across something on the tunnel wall. Scratches, deep gouges in the stone. They ran in parallel lines like claw marks, but they were too large and too deep to be made by any animal. They covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Hundreds of them, thousands, overlapping. Some looked fresh despite the mine being sealed for decades. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in clouds. Ice formed on the tunnel walls even though it was 50 degrees outside. I could hear water dripping somewhere, each drop hitting stone with a sound like breaking glass. And underneath everything, a rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat, coming from deep in the mountain. I ran. The voices followed me. They were not just behind me anymore. They were beside me, in front of me, coming from the walls themselves. I could hear the preacher screaming now, his words breaking with terror, begging for protection, calling on saints and angels. And I could hear something else laughing, a sound that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. I made it to the gate and slammed it shut behind me. The voices stopped instantly. The tunnel was silent. I stood there breathing hard, my hands shaking, trying to convince myself I had experienced some kind of acoustic phenomenon. Some trick of the mine, this structure that made sounds carry and echo in strange ways. But that night in my tent, I heard the praying again. Distant, muffled, coming from the direction of the mine. It went on for hours. I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back the next morning, there was nothing. Just wind and silence. But I knew what I had heard, and I knew I needed to understand what had happened in that mine. I spent the 4th day in the town, this old office building, searching through abandoned records. Most of the paperwork had been removed when the mine closed, but some personnel files remained. Tucked in a filing cabinet, I found a stack of incident reports from 1936 and 1937. The reports described accidents, cave-ins, equipment failures, injuries from falling rock. But there was a pattern. Starting in the summer of 1936, miners began refusing to work in certain sections of the Bonanza mine. They reported hearing voices, seeing shapes moving in tunnels that should be empty, feeling watched. Several men quit without explanation. Others developed psychological problems. One miner attacked a coworker with a pickaxe, claiming the man was not human, that something was wearing his skin. The mining company brought in a priest in November of 1936. Father Thomas Brennan from Cordova. The reports did not say why, just that he performed several blessing ceremonies in the mine and assured management the situation was under control. But it was not under control. In January of 1937, 3 miners disappeared during a night shift. They entered the mine together and never came out. Search teams found no bodies. No signs of cave-in or accident. Just empty tunnels and the abandoned tools. One search report noted strange sounds heard during the investigation. Voices speaking in unison, growling, laughter. Father Brennan returned in March of 1937. This time the reports were more specific. He told management that something had been disturbed in the deep sections of the mine. Something old that had been sleeping in the copper veins. He said it was not human and never had been. He said it needed to be banished before it killed everyone in Kennecott. The final report was dated March 20th, 1937. Father Brennan entered the mine alone to perform an exorcism. He specifically requested that no one follow him. He said the ritual was dangerous and could take days to complete. He went in at dawn. By sunset, workers reported hearing screaming from inside the mountain. Not just the priest, multiple voices screaming in harmony. The sounds continued all night. At dawn on March 21st, the mine superintendent entered with a rescue team. They found Father Brennan, this Bible and prayer book at a junction about 300 feet into the main tunnel. Both books were shredded, pages torn out and scattered. The words on the remaining pages were scorched black like they had been burned from within. They found the priest, his crucifix further in. It was bent and twisted. The figure of Christ had been scraped off. They never found Father Brennan. But they heard him. The rescue team reported his voice coming from multiple tunnels simultaneously. He was still performing the exorcism, still commanding the demon to depart, still praying for divine protection. But his voice was wrong, distorted, like multiple recordings of the same person playing at different speeds. The mine was sealed the next day. The company claimed it was due to unstable geology. But the real reason was in a confidential memo I found attached to the incident reports. The superintendent wrote that whatever was in the mine had not been banished. It had trapped the priest, caught him somehow in the act of exorcism and frozen him in that moment. He wrote that Father Brennan was still down there, still fighting, still losing, and would be for eternity. Kennecott closed entirely in 1938. Official reason was depleted ore and economic downturn. But I found a letter from the superintendent to the company board. He wrote that the workers refused to go near the mine, that the sounds had grown louder, that the thing in the mountain was getting stronger. He recommended abandoning the entire operation before anyone else disappeared. I should have left after reading those files. Should have called the ranger and demanded immediate evacuation. But I needed proof. I needed to document what was happening. So on my 4th night, I returned to the mine entrance with my camera and audio recorder. I did not go inside. I set up my equipment outside the gate and waited. Around midnight, the praying started. I recorded 20 minutes of it. Multiple voices speaking Latin exorcism prayers. Screaming, crying, begging, and underneath it all, that growling laughter. But here's what made me abandon my equipment and run back to town. The voices were not just coming from inside the mine. They were coming from behind me, from the mill buildings, from the old hospital, from the town itself. I turned and saw lights in the windows of structures that had no electricity. Movement in doorways, shadows that were too tall and moved too smoothly. The demon was not trapped in the mine. It was everywhere. It had been everywhere since 1937. The entire town was its territory. And Father Brennan was still fighting it. Still trapped in that moment of attempted exorcism. Still losing, his voice echoing through Kennecott every night, trying desperately to finish a ritual he would never complete. I ran to the tent and grabbed my gear. I hiked through the darkness toward the road, using my sat phone to call for emergency extraction. The ranger arrived at dawn, earlier than scheduled. He took one look at me and asked if I had heard the preacher. I said yes. He nodded like he expected it and told me to get in the truck. On the drive out, he explained that the Park Service knows about Father Brennan. Everyone who works in the area knows. They hear the prayers, they see the shapes, but they cannot talk about it officially because it would end tourism and research access. He said most people only hear it once or twice during their stay. He said the ones who hear it every night, who the demon takes an interest in, those people need to leave immediately. He said I was lucky, that I had gotten out before it decided to keep me. He said 3 researchers had disappeared from Kennecott since it became a park. All of them were last seen near the mine entrance. All of them had reported hearing Father Brennan's voice. All of them had gone looking for the source. I never published my findings. The Park Service confiscated my recordings, my photos, all my research materials. They offered me a significant amount of money to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I took it, but I kept copies. I kept the evidence. And I am telling you now because people need to know what is really in those mountains. Father Brennan never finished his exorcism because you cannot banish something that was never from our world to begin with. The thing in the copper mine was not a demon that came from somewhere else. It was already there, living in the stone, in the metal, in the mountain itself. The mining operation broke through into its space, released it, gave it access to our reality. And when Father Brennan tried to send it back, it caught him, trapped him in the moment between worlds, between life and death, between prayer and silence. He exists now in a state of perpetual exorcism, fighting a battle he can never win, trying to banish something that cannot be banished. His voice will echo through those tunnels forever, and the demon will keep laughing, keep scratching at the walls, keep waiting for the next person who ventures too deep into the darkness, the next soul it can add to its collection. If you ever visit Kennecott, if you ever hear prayers echoing through the abandoned buildings, do not go looking for the source. Do not try to help. Father Brennan is beyond help. He has been for 70 years. And if you go looking for him, if you get too close to understanding what really happened in that mine, the demon will notice you. It will learn your voice. And one day, decades from now, tourists will hear you too. Your voice will join the chorus, praying, screaming, forever trapped in the copper and the stone and the darkness. Story 7. Marks below the surface. The burns on my hands started appearing 6 days ago, and I know exactly how long I have left before I drown in perfectly calm water. My name is Owen Castellano. I am a fishing guide on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. 40 years old, been working these waters for nearly 2 decades. I know Kenai Lake like I know my own reflection. Every inlet, every drop-off, every place where the big trout hide. Or at least, I thought I did. Before I learned what was really down there. Before I understood why those 3 men drowned in 1998. It started 2 weeks ago with a client request that should have been routine. A guy from California wanted a private guided trip on Kenai Lake. Early morning, just him. He was willing to pay triple my normal rate for exclusivity. Said he wanted to fish the exact spot where his father had drowned 27 years ago. That should have been my first warning. But money talks, especially in the off-season. I took the job. His name was Michael Preston. Mid-40s, quiet. He showed up at the dock at 5 in the morning with expensive gear and a photograph. The photo showed 3 men on a boat, smiling, holding up rainbow trout. The image was dated September 14th, 1998. He pointed to the man on the left, said that was his father, James Preston, one of the 3 fishermen who drowned that day. And he wanted to go to the exact coordinates where the bodies were found. I knew the story. Everyone who works Kenai Lake knows it. 3 experienced fishermen went out on a perfectly calm September morning. The lake was glass smooth. No wind, no waves. Water temperature was 42 degrees, cold but not frozen. They were all wearing life jackets. All good swimmers. Their boat was found hours later, drifting empty near the shore. No damage. Engine still running. Fishing gear still neatly arranged. The bodies were discovered 3 days later by divers. All 3 men were found sitting upright on the lake bottom, 60 feet down, still in their life jackets, arms at their sides. Like they had simply walked down there and sat down. Like they had chosen to drown. The autopsies revealed they had drowned, water in their lungs, no signs of struggle or trauma. But there was one detail that never made it into the official reports. Something the medical examiner only told the families. Each man had identical burns on both palms and both soles of their feet. Perfect circles, about 2 inches in diameter, burned deep into the tissue. The burns were fresh, inflicted within hours of death. Nobody could explain them. No electrical equipment on the boat. No chemical burns. No source of heat that could have caused those marks. The case was filed as accidental drowning with unexplained circumstances. And for 27 years, it stayed that way. Until Michael Preston hired me to take him to the spot where his father died. We launched at dawn. The lake was mirror still, exactly like it had been in '98. I navigated to the coordinates Michael provided, about 2 miles from shore, near the deeper section of the lake. When we reached the spot, he asked me to cut the engine. The silence was immediate and complete. No wind, no birds, just the gentle lap of water against the hull and our breathing. Michael stared at the water like he was looking for something beneath the surface. Then he pulled out a depth finder, the expensive kind with sonar imaging, and dropped the transducer over the side. I asked him what he was looking for. He said he wanted to see what his father saw. What made 3 experienced fishermen take off their boots, remove their gloves, and climb overboard into 42-degree water. The sonar screen flickered to life. It showed the lake bottom 63 feet below us. Rocky, covered in sediment. And then something else appeared on the screen. A formation. Perfectly circular. About 40 feet in diameter. The sonar couldn't quite read it. The signal kept distorting. Like something was interfering with it. Michael, his hand started shaking. He said his father, his journal mentioned seeing something in the water the morning they died. A light, deep below the surface. Moving in circles. Getting brighter. I told him it was probably just underwater vegetation or a thermal layer causing refraction. But he shook his head. He said his father, this last journal entry, written the night before he died, described dreams. The same dream every night for a week. Walking into the lake, feeling something calling to him from the bottom. Feeling marks burning into his hands and feet like a brand, like a summons. And then Michael showed me his own palms. There were marks, faint, circular, like the beginning stages of a burn. He said they had started appearing 3 days ago. Same pattern as his father, his autopsy photos. Same locations. That was when I should have turned the boat around, headed back to shore, ended the trip, but I didn't. Because when I looked at the sonar screen, I saw movement. Something was rising from the bottom. Fast. The depth finder showed it ascending. 60 feet, 50, 40, and then the screen went dead. Complete system failure. The backup electronics died too. My phone, Michael's phone, the GPS. Everything electronic on the boat shut down at once. The water around us started to glow. Not bright, not obvious, just a faint luminescence, like moonlight trapped beneath the surface. And it was moving, circling the boat, going deeper, creating a spiral of light that pulled down toward the lake floor. Michael was leaning over the side, staring into the water. His eyes were wide, unfocused, like he was seeing something I couldn't. He started unlacing his boots. I grabbed him, pulled him back, shook him, asked him what he was doing. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said recalling. I have to go. They've been waiting for me. I held him down, started the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. Dead. Every system dead. We were adrift in the middle of the lake with something circling beneath us and Michael fighting to get into the water. The light grew brighter, and I started to see shapes in it. Forms. Human forms. 3 of them, standing on the lake bottom, looking up, reaching up, and I recognized one of them from the photograph. James Preston, exactly as he had looked 27 years ago. Not aged, not decayed, just standing there in the light, beckoning. My hands started to burn. I looked down and saw the marks forming. Perfect circles on both palms. The pain was intense, like touching a hot stove, but worse, because it wasn't just burning my skin. It was burning into my mind, pulling at something deep in my consciousness, trying to drag me down into the water. I forced myself to look away from the light, grabbed the oars, started rowing toward shore. Michael was screaming now, begging me to let him go, saying his father was down there, saying they all were, everyone who had ever drowned in this lake. Waiting, calling, building something. I rowed for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The light followed us. The burning in my hands got worse. But I kept rowing, and eventually, mercifully, we reached shallow water. The moment the boat hit the shore, the light disappeared. The electronics came back online, and Michael collapsed, unconscious. I got him to the hospital. They treated him for shock and minor burns. The marks on his palms were real, documented, but the doctors had no explanation. They thought maybe he had grabbed something hot on the boat, had some kind of episode. They kept him for observation. I went home, bandaged my hands, and tried to convince myself it was some kind of mass hallucination. Gas leak, carbon monoxide, something rational, but the marks didn't fade. They got worse, deeper, more defined. And at night, I started having the dreams. I am standing at the edge of Kenai Lake. The water is glowing, and I can see them all down there. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Every person who has ever drowned in this lake, going back centuries. Native fishermen, gold rush prospectors, modern tourists, all standing in perfect circles. All with the marks on their hands and feet. All adding to something, building something. A structure made of light and consciousness and stolen lives. And at the center of it all, something massive. Something that It's been growing down there for longer than humans have existed. Something that calls to us through the water, that marks us, claims us, pulls us down one by one to join the others. I started researching, digging through historical records, and I found a pattern. Kenai Lake has one of the highest drowning rates in Alaska, has for over 200 years. Bodies are rarely recovered, and when they are, there are always unexplained details. Burns, marks, strange positioning. The native Aina people who originally inhabited this area had stories about the lake, about something that lived in the deepest part, something they called the sleeper below. They said it dreamed of the world above, and in its dreams, it pulled people down to join it, to become part of its consciousness, part of its slow awakening. They had a tradition. Anyone who felt the call, anyone who started seeing the light or feeling the marks, had to leave, had to get as far from the water as possible, because once the sleeper marked you, you had 7 days. 7 days before the pull became irresistible. 7 days before you walked into the water and never came back. Today is day 6. The marks on my hands are complete now. Perfect circles, burned so deep I can see bone. The marks on my feet started yesterday. Same pattern, same depth, and the dreams are constant now. Not just when I sleep. I see the light everywhere. In puddles, in my bathroom mirror when it fogs up, in the reflection of car windows. And I can hear them calling. Hundreds of voices, thousands, all speaking in unison, saying it's time, saying I've been chosen, saying the sleeper is ready to wake and it needs one more. Just one more to complete the pattern. I tried to run, got in my truck yesterday and drove south, made it almost to Seward before I had to pull over. The pain was unbearable, not in my hands, in my chest, in my skull, like something was pulling me back with hooks embedded in my bones. I turned around, drove back to Kenai, and the moment I got close to the lake, the pain stopped. I can leave. The marks want to let me. Michael Preston is gone. He checked himself out of the hospital 3 days ago. They found his car at the boat launch this morning. His boots and clothes folded neatly on the dock, and in the water, just beneath the surface, they could see a faint glow. The search and rescue team won to go in. They say the electronics keep failing. The divers say they hear voices, feel something pulling at them. They were waiting for specialized equipment, but I know they won. We find anything? Michael is down there, standing with his father, with all the others, waiting for me to join them. I went to the lake this afternoon, stood at the edge, looked into the water, and I could see it clearly now. The structure they've been building. It looks like a cathedral. Spiraling columns of light, arches made of human consciousness. And at the center, something vast and dark and dreaming. The sleeper, growing larger with each person it claims, each mind it absorbs. And I finally understood, it is not malicious. It is not evil. It is simply waking up. After millions of years of sleep, it is opening its eyes. And it needs us to help it. Needs our minds, our awareness, our life force to fuel its awakening. The native people were right. It dreams of the world above. And soon, very soon, it will be strong enough to reach it, to pull itself out of the deep places and walk among us. The marks are burning constantly now. Even as I record this, the pain is beyond description, and the call is overwhelming. Every cell in my body is screaming to walk into that water, to join the others, to become part of something vast and ancient and incomprehensible. I am leaving this recording because I need someone to know, need someone to understand. The drownings won. T-stop. They re-accelerating. 3 and 98. Michael last week. Me tomorrow. And after me, more. Always more. Until the sleeper has enough. Until it completes whatever it is building down there. If you live near Kenai Lake, leave. Now. Dawn. Wait, Dawn. To think about it. Just go. And if you start seeing lights in the water, if you start feeling burns on your hands and feet, you have 7 days. 7 days to get as far from deep water as possible. 7 days before you become another voice in the chorus below. I can see the sun setting now. And in the fading light, the lake is glowing. Bright enough to be visible from shore. Bright enough that others will see it. Others will be curious. Others will be marked. I am going to walk to the water now. I am going to take off my boots. Remove my jacket. And I am going to wade in. Because I don't have a choice anymore. The pain is too much. The call is too strong. And maybe, just maybe, on the other side of drowning, I'll finally understand what we rebuilding down there. What the sleeper needs us for. But here, it's what terrifies me most. What keeps me recording until the very last second. I've been having new dreams. Dreams that aren't to mine. Dreams that belong to the sleeper. And in those dreams, I see the future. I see the lake draining, the water receding, the bottom exposed, and rising from the center. Something massive. Something made of light and consciousness and thousands of human minds woven together. Something that has been waiting beneath the surface of every deep lake, every ocean, every place where water meets darkness. And I see it spreading, calling to every body of water on earth, waking others of its kind, until the whole world is marked, until we're all hearing the call, until humanity walks into the water together and never comes back. The marks are glowing now, white hot, unbearable. I can't wait any longer. The water is calling. We're all calling, saying welcome home, saying they've been waiting, saying the sleeper is almost awake and the world above is almost ready. If you, re-listening to this, check your hands, check your feet, look for the circles, because if you've been near deep water, if you felt the call, even for a moment, you were already marked. You were already chosen. And in 7 days, you'll understand everything. The water, this edge is right in front of me now. I can see them all below. Thousands of faces, all looking up, all smiling, all reaching for me. And at the center, that massive presence, opening its eyes, beginning to rise. I am stepping in. The water is cold, but the burning in my hands and feet is fading, replaced by something else. Not peace, not acceptance, but understanding. They were not drowning us. They re-transforming us, making us part of something larger, something that will reshape everything. And the last thought I'll have as a human, the last words I'll speak into this recorder before the water closes over my head, is this. It's not just Kenai Lake. It's every deep water on earth. They were all waking up, all calling, all building. And when they rise, when they finally break the surface and show themselves to the world above, humanity won. Fight. We all walk into the water willingly. I'll let them mark us, change us, because by then, I'll all hear the call. I'll all understand that we were never meant to stay on land. We were always meant to go down, to join the sleeper, to become part of something vast and ancient that dreams beneath the waves. The water is at my chest now. I can feel the marks burning brighter. I can see the light rising to meet me. I am letting go of the recorder. It'll float. Someone will find it. Someone will listen. And if you rehearing this, check the water tonight. Check every lake, every ocean. Look for the glow, because the sleeper is waking. And soon, very soon, I'll all go down to meet it. Story 8. Second climber, the thing about seeing yourself die is that your brain refuses to accept it. Even when you staring at your own corpse, watching it move, watching it climb behind you with skin the color of charcoal and a smile that splits frozen flesh, your mind keeps insisting it is a hallucination. Altitude sickness, oxygen deprivation, anything but the truth. But I know what I saw on Denali. I know what followed me down that mountain. And I know it is still out there, wearing my face, waiting for the next climber who thinks they can conquer the high one alone. My name is Marcus Webb. I've summited 23 major peaks across 6 continents. Everest twice, K2 once, barely. I've spent more nights above 20,000 feet than most people spend in airplanes. When I decided to attempt a solo winter ascent of Denali, Alaska, its crown jewel at 20,310 feet, nobody questioned my ability. They questioned my sanity, but not my skill. I started my climb on January 7th. Winter ascents of Denali are rare. The mountain kills experienced climbers in summer. In winter, with temperatures dropping to 70 below and winds exceeding 100 miles per hour, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a proving ground for the kind of person who needs to test themselves against the absolute limit of what is survivable. The first 3 days went perfectly. I established camps at 7,000, 11,000, and 14,000 feet. The weather held, my body acclimatized. I felt strong, focused, ready. On day 4, as I pushed toward my high camp at 17,000 feet, I saw the first sign that something was wrong. Footprints in the snow, fresh ones, leading up the mountain, paralleling my route about 50 yards to the east. I stopped, checked my GPS, confirmed I was alone in this sector. No other climbers had permits for winter ascents. The Park Service had told me I'd be the only person above base camp. But those prints were there, clear as day, the distinctive pattern of mountaineering boots pressed into fresh powder. I told myself they were old, maybe from a fall attempt that got covered and uncovered by wind patterns. But I knew better. I'd seen enough snow to recognize fresh tracks. These were hours old at most. Someone else was on the mountain with me. That night at 14,000 feet, huddled in my tent as wind screamed across the glacier, I heard it. Footsteps crunching through snow. Slow, deliberate, circling my camp. I grabbed my headlamp, unzipped the tent fly, looked out into the darkness. Nothing, just wind and snow and the vast emptiness of the mountain. But the footsteps continued, just at the edge of my hearing, a steady rhythm that matched a human walking pace. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those steps, felt the presence of something outside my tent, something patient and watchful. When dawn finally came, I found tracks around my camp, a complete circle, perfectly spaced, like someone had walked around my tent exactly once before disappearing into the white. Day 5, I pushed for 17,000 feet. The climbing was technical, demanding full concentration. Ice walls, crevasse fields, sections where one mistake means 1,000-foot fall into nothing. But I kept seeing movement in my peripheral vision, a figure, always at the edge of visibility, always climbing parallel to my route, always matching my pace. I tried to get a clear look several times. The figure would vanish whenever I focused on it directly. But I caught glimpses. Same color jacket as mine, same pack, same build. It was like watching a shadow version of myself, tracking me up the mountain, maintaining that constant 50-yard distance. At 17,000 feet, I set up my high camp. This would be my launch point for the summit push. I was ahead of schedule, feeling good despite the lack of sleep. I melted snow for water, ate a freeze-dried meal, tried to rest. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I looked out of my tent, I saw nothing. Every time I looked away, I felt eyes on me. That night, the temperature dropped to 60 below. My tent walls frosted solid from my breath. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the wind, and heard them again. Footsteps. But this time they stopped right outside my tent. I could hear breathing, heavy, labored, the sound of someone who had been climbing for days in extreme conditions. I called out, asked who was there. The breathing stopped. Then I heard a zipper. Someone was opening my tent from the outside. I watched the fabric part, watched a gloved hand reach through, and I saw the wrist. Blackened, frostbitten, necrotic tissue that should have been on a corpse. Not a living climber. I screamed, threw myself backward. The hand withdrew, the zipper closed. When I finally worked up the courage to look outside, there was nothing. No tracks, no evidence anyone had been there. But my tent zipper was open 3 inches from the outside, and there was ice on the inside of the fabric where that hand had touched it. Day 6, I should have descended. Every instinct I developed over 2 decades of climbing told me to get off that mountain. But summit fever is real. I was so close. One more day, one more push. I trained for a year for this. I couldn't give up because of some hallucinations and weird coincidences. I started my summit attempt at 3 in the morning on day 7. The weather was perfect, unusually calm for January. Stars filled the sky, and my headlamp beam cut through crystal clear air. I made good time, reached 18,000 feet by sunrise. That's when I saw him clearly for the first time. He was standing about 30 feet ahead of me, facing away, looking up at the summit ridge. Same jacket, same pack, same everything, except as I got closer, I could see his exposed skin. His neck, his wrists, the gap between his hat and collar. It was black, not tanned, not dirty, black like severe frostbite, like flesh that had died and mummified in the cold. He turned around. I stopped moving, stopped breathing, because I was looking at my own face. Same features, same beard, same sunglasses. But the skin was wrong, blackened, frozen, and he was smiling. A wide, impossible smile that showed too many teeth, that split the dead flesh of his cheeks and kept stretching wider and wider, until it looked like his face would tear in half. I backed up. He matched me step for step, maintaining that exact distance. I tried to speak, to shout, to do anything, but no sound came out. He raised one hand, pointed at me, then pointed up at the summit. The message was clear. Keep climbing. That's what I'd come for. That's what he wanted. I ran, turned and scrambled down the mountain as fast as I could without falling. Behind me, I heard laughter. not human laughter. The sound of wind through ice caves, of avalanches rumbling in the distance, of the mountain itself finding humor in my terror. And I heard footsteps, matching my pace, never getting closer but never falling behind. At 17,000 feet, I grabbed essential gear from my high camp and kept descending. I didn't stop to rest, didn't stop to drink. I just ran, slid, repelled, anything to get down. The figure followed the entire way, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, sometimes climbing right next to me on the other side of a crevasse. Always wearing my face, always smiling that terrible smile. I reached base camp after 20 hours of continuous descent. Park rangers met me there, concerned about my early return. I tried to explain, tried to tell them about the other climber, about my doppelganger. They nodded, wrote notes, and I could see them thinking. Altitude sickness, psychological breakdown. Solo climbers experience strange things. But that night, safe in Tahkeetna, I downloaded my summit camera footage. I'd been wearing a chest-mounted GoPro the entire climb, recording everything. I watched the footage from day 7, from that final morning. And there he was, clear as day, standing 30 feet ahead of me, turning around, showing that blackened face and that inhuman smile. The camera caught it all. I showed the rangers. They went silent. One of them, an older guy named Patterson, who worked Denali for 30 years, took me aside. He told me about the others, 4 climbers over the past 20 years who reported similar experiences. Solo winter attempts, always around 17 to 18,000 feet, always seeing themselves, or something wearing their face. 3 of those climbers never summited. The 4th pushed through, made the top, and was never seen again. His gear was found at high camp. His body was never recovered. Patterson told me about an Athabaskan legend. The mountain has a spirit, something old and hungry that lives in the high camps. It takes the form of climbers, wears their faces, tries to lure them higher. Those who follow it disappear. Those who run live but carry something back with them. A piece of the mountain. A connection. I've been home for 3 weeks now. Phoenix, Arizona. As far from mountains as I can get. But I still see him. In reflections. In photographs. Standing in the background of my climbing pictures. Always just at the edge of the frame. Always wearing that blackened skin and terrible smile. And I'm cold all the time. Even in 100-degree heat. I am shivering. Last week, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a piece of gear, a carabiner, with my name engraved on it. I lost that carabiner somewhere above 17,000 feet on Denali. And attached to it was a note in my own handwriting, though I never wrote it. The words were simple. Still climbing. Still waiting. Come back and finish. I started having dreams. I am back on Denali, pushing for the summit. But this time I don't run when I see my doppelganger. This time I follow him up, higher and higher, until we reach the top together. And when we get there, he turns to me with that split smile, and I understand. There is only room for one of us. One stays on the mountain forever. One gets to leave, but here, it's what terrifies me most. In the dreams, I can't tell which one I am anymore. Am I the climber who escaped? Or am I the thing that wears his face, waiting on the mountain, calling him back to finish what we started? My hands are so cold right now, numb. And when I look at them, sometimes they seem darker than they should be. Sometimes I catch myself smiling in the mirror, and my mouth stretches just a little too wide, shows just a few too many teeth. I am booking a flight back to Alaska next week. I tell myself it is to recover gear I left behind. But I know the truth. The mountain ISN, done with me. My doppelganger ISN, done with me. And some part of me, some piece that I left at 17,000 feet, is calling me back. If you ever see me on Denali, climbing alone in winter, wearing that smile, Don, to try to help. Don, to try to talk to me. Just turn around and descend as fast as you can. Because it might not be me anymore. It might be the thing I became. The thing that lives on the mountain now. The thing that's still climbing. Still waiting. Still hungry for the summit we never reached together. I'm so cold. And I can stop smiling. Story 9. Siren of the frozen river, the ice was singing my daughter. His voice. And that is when I knew I was going to die. I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I am a rational man. I spent 20 years as an electrical engineer in Phoenix before my wife passed and everything fell apart. I am not the kind of person who believes in ghosts or monsters or any of that supernatural garbage you see on cable TV. But what happened to me on the Yukon River 3 weeks ago changed everything I thought I knew about the world. It started when my brother called me in January. He moved to Alaska 5 years earlier, bought himself a cabin outside Fairbanks, and started running trap lines like some kind of frontier fantasy. I thought he was crazy. Turned out I was right, just not in the way I expected. He told me he'd been hearing things out on the ice, that something was wrong, that he needed help. His voice sounded strange on the phone, hollow and distant, like he was calling from the bottom of a well. I flew up 2 days later. The temperature was 40 below when I landed, cold enough that the inside of my nose froze when I breathed. My brother picked me up at the airport, and I barely recognized him. He lost maybe 30 pounds. His eyes were sunken and dark, and his hands shook constantly. He wouldn't tell me what was wrong during the drive to his cabin. He just kept the radio turned up loud, some classic rock station, like he was afraid of the silence. That first night, he told me about the singing. He'd been checking his trap lines along the lower Yukon near a place called Devil's Bend when he heard it. A woman's voice, clear as a bell, coming from somewhere out on the frozen river. At first, he thought it was a radio or maybe his phone, but the sound was too pure, too perfect. It was singing an old lullaby, the same one our mother used to sing to us when we were kids. My brother made the mistake of following it. He walked out onto the ice, drawn by that impossible voice, until he was standing in the middle of the river. That's when he looked down and saw them through the ice. Bodies, dozens of them, suspended in the frozen water like insects in amber. Men in old fur parkas, men in modern winter gear, men from different decades, all trapped in the same place. Their faces were pressed against the underside of the ice, mouths open, eyes wide and white. He ran, made it back to shore before the ice gave way, but the singing followed him home. He heard it every night after that, growing louder, more insistent. It knew where he lived now. It wanted him to come back. I didn't believe him. I thought the isolation had gotten to him, that he was having some kind of breakdown. I'd seen it before with guys who moved to Alaska thinking they wanted solitude, only to discover that true loneliness can break your mind faster than any drug. I figured I'd stay a few days, convince him to see a doctor, maybe get him back to civilization. Then I heard it myself. It was our second night there. I'd gone outside around midnight to grab more firewood from the shed. The sky was clear, filled with more stars than I'd ever seen in my life, and the aurora borealis was dancing in green sheets across the northern horizon. Beautiful and alien and completely silent. That is the thing about Alaska in winter. The silence is absolute. No cars, no planes, no distant voices. Just the sound of your own breathing and the crunch of snow under your boots. That is when the singing started. Faint at first, barely audible over the wind, but growing steadily clearer. It was coming from the direction of the river, maybe half a mile away through the trees. And it wasn't singing some generic tune. It was singing Happy Birthday, my daughter's favorite song, in my daughter's voice. My daughter, who'd been dead for 2 years, killed by a drunk driver on the interstate outside Scottsdale. My body went numb. The firewood fell from my hands. I stood there in the snow, listening to my dead child singing to me from the frozen darkness, and every rational thought in my head simply evaporated. I started walking toward the river. I couldn't stop myself. It was like being in a dream where you know what is happening but have no control over your actions. My legs moved independently, carrying me through the trees, following that sweet, impossible voice. The river appeared suddenly through the forest, a wide expanse of white that glowed faintly in the starlight. The ice looked thick and safe, covered in wind-blown snow. The singing was louder now, coming from somewhere out in the middle, and I could hear my daughter laughing between verses. That bright, innocent sound she used to make when I pushed her on the swings. I stepped onto the ice. It felt solid beneath my boots. Reassuring. I took another step, another. The singing wrapped around me like a warm blanket, pushing away the cold, pushing away the grief that had been crushing me for 2 years. Just a little further and I'd see her. Just a little further and everything would be okay again. Then something hit me from behind, hard enough to knock me flat. My brother tackled me like a linebacker, driving me face first into the snow. We slid several feet before stopping. He was screaming at me, but I couldn't to hear the words over the singing. He dragged me backward, off the ice, back toward the trees. I fought him. God help me, I fought him like a wild animal, desperate to get back to that voice. The singing stopped the moment we reached the shore. The sudden silence was like a slap across the face. I came back to myself slowly, shaking and confused, my brother, his arms wrapped around me in a restraining hold. We stayed like that for a long time, both of us crying, both of us terrified. He told me the rest of it back at the cabin. The legend was old, older than Alaska, the statehood, older than the gold rush. Native trappers had stories about it going back generations. A spirit that lived in the river, something that fed on loneliness and grief. It would take the voice of whoever you lost, whoever you missed most in the world, and use it to lure you out onto the ice. The ice above the deepest part of the channel, where the current ran fast and strong beneath the frozen surface. Where the ice looked thick but was actually thin as window glass. Everyone who followed the singing fell through. The current pulled them under immediately, swept them downstream beneath solid ice where no rescue was possible. Their bodies were never recovered because they never floated. They stayed down there, trapped under the ice, preserved by the cold. And somehow, the thing in the river kept them aware, kept them conscious, added their voices to its collection. That's why the singing was so perfect. It wasn't mimicking the dead. It was using the dead themselves, hundreds of trapped souls crying out through the ice, each one tailored to whoever was listening, each one promising an end to loneliness and pain. I wanted to leave immediately, pack our stuff and drive straight back to Fairbanks. But my brother refused. He said it wouldn't matter. The singing would follow us. It had marked us both now, and it would call to us wherever we went. The only way to break free was to face it directly, to resist its call until it gave up and moved on to easier prey. We spent 3 days barricaded in that cabin, both of us hearing the singing every night. It came at different times, never predictable, always when we were most vulnerable. I heard my daughter, my brother heard our mother, dead for 15 years. We heard my wife, we heard friends we lost, relatives we buried, even pets from our childhood. The thing in the river was reaching deep into our memories, pulling out every loss, every regret, every person we failed to save or failed to appreciate while they were alive. On the fourth night, the singing changed. It wasn't calling us to the river anymore. It was coming from inside the cabin. I heard footsteps in the hallway, small feet, child-sized, moving toward my bedroom door. The doorknob turned slowly. I saw it in the darkness, reflecting the faint red glow from the wood stove. The door creaked open an inch, and my daughter, his voice whispered that she was cold, that she wanted to come in, that she missed me. I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was the thing from the river, somehow projecting itself into our space, getting stronger because we resisted for so long. But knowing didn't help. My hand reached for the bedside lamp. The light clicked on. Nothing was there. The hallway was empty, but the singing continued, now coming from the living room, from the kitchen, from the bathroom, from everywhere and nowhere. The cabin filled with overlapping voices. All of them people we loved. All of them begging us to come outside, to come to the river, to come home. My brother broke first. I heard him get up in the next room, heard him putting on his coat and boots. I ran to stop him, but he was already out the door, moving fast through the snow. I grabbed my own gear and chased after him, but he had a head start. By the time I reached the tree line, he was already on the ice, walking toward the center of the river where the singing was loudest. I screamed his name, but he didn't turn around. I could see him in the starlight, a dark figure moving steadily away from shore. Then he stopped. He looked down at his feet, and I saw the ice change color beneath him, going from white to dark gray to black as water flooded up through invisible cracks. He didn't have time to scream. The ice gave way all at once, and he dropped through like he stepped into an elevator shaft. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. The hole in the ice was perfectly circular, maybe 6 feet across, the edges smooth like they'd been cut with a saw. I could see the current beneath, black and fast, carrying nothing. The singing stopped immediately. The silence that replaced it was worse than any sound. I stood at the edge of the ice for hours, waiting for him to surface, knowing he wouldn't. As dawn broke, I finally accepted what had happened. My brother was gone, pulled down into that collection of lost souls. His voice added to the river, this terrible chorus. I left Alaska that morning, drove to Fairbanks and caught the first flight south. I hated to been back. I'll never go back. But it doesn't matter, because my brother was right. The singing followed me home. I hear it most nights now, usually around 3 in the morning. My daughter, this voice, calling from somewhere outside my apartment in Phoenix. Sometimes it's my brother, this voice, begging me to come help him, telling me he is cold and trapped and needs me. I keep my windows locked. I keep my doors barred. I never go outside after dark, because I know what is waiting. I know that somewhere in some metaphysical space that connects to every body of water in the world, the thing from the Yukon River is watching me, waiting for the moment when my grief becomes unbearable, when my loneliness cracks me open, when I'm weak enough to follow that beautiful, terrible voice one more time. And the worst part, I want to, God help me, I want to hear my daughter sing again, even if it costs me everything. Even if I know it's not really her. Because sometimes the lie is better than the truth. Sometimes being trapped forever is better than being alone. The ice is singing tonight. I can hear it through the walls. The last whisper fades, but the cold lingers. If you felt the dark tonight, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story waits just beyond the ice. Tell us where you're listening from or share your own strange encounter. Your words feed the fire here at Midnight Whispers. Alaska's night is long, and our stories are longer. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your footsteps soft.